Good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers before our studies from the Upanishad. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Om Bhurbhavaswa Tatsavitravarenyam Vargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Asto Ma Sadgamya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya Mrityormamritam Gamya Om Sahna Bhavatu Sahna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti 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 Om. Let's open our books. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And we finished in the first chapter of the fourth section, the verse number 6. And in this section, we see how this Rishi is explaining the creation to us, how this creation happened. A lot of details over there. And then we saw he said that it's love is the greatest. We are all familiar with human love, but he says that human love is just a fraction of that supreme love, because it's just a distorted reflection of the love of the self. Because the self is the deepest core in every being. So this Rishi warns us that while the truth is like this, and if anyone considers through ignorance that something else is dearer than the dearest self, then that something is sure to perish. So that's why he's telling us to meditate on the self alone as a dear and not any object other to it. So this Upanishad, we also get the clarity about the nature of this great knowledge by which we all know everything. We possess everything by becoming everything. That means we feel oneness with everything. So this knowledge is called the knowledge of Brahma. It always remains revealed and it is never obscured actually, but out of our ignorance, we don't know it. Because in the absolute level, it cannot be, nothing can be anything other than Brahma under any condition of space, time, and causation. To say that one attains Brahma after realization, we are just only presupposing that one was something other than Brahma before. How can there be something other than the absolute at any time, whether we know it or not? So all difficulties and doubts crop up in understanding and knowing the absolute because of the ignorance in us. And we will see that maybe today or next time with the continuation of the story of creation, where this Rishi deals with the division of society into 4 main groups, depending on the predominant psyche of the individual. That's exactly what Lord Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita. They are the spiritual group, the ruling group, the economic group, and the labor group. And this grouping is universal. It's not only for Bharatvarsha, not for people who call themselves Hindus. So it's not particular to any country or any period. It started with the creation of the world by the Creator. And it is in the cosmic mind. And this grouping somehow happened to be given the unfortunate name of caste in India, with a strong stigma attached to it. But when we fully understand it, we see that how this is universal and how it is important for any society to run smoothly. And these four groups are the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. We will see that this Rishi is telling us that in the Satya Yuga, the original condition, there was no grouping actually. Because the principle of dharma was complete. It was just a spontaneous nature of each and every individual to follow the dharma. But as the externalization of the consciousness increased, identification with the body intensified in Treta Yuga, and the principle of Kshatri manifested itself as a Indra, Varun, Som, Rudra, Yam, Mrityu, all of those. So that's how slowly we see that from the pure, absolute purity, it just became more and more Rajsikta, then ultimately Tamsikta also. So we'll see all this in this particular section. But let's go back to verse number 7 of this section, because we finished verse number 6 last time. Tadvedidam tarhi vyakritam asit tannam rupa Vyayem vyakriyat asau naam ayam idam rupam iti tad idam aprehi naam rupa abhyamev vyakriyate oso naam idam rup iti sa esh hi pravishtaha a nakh agrebhya yathakshuraha क्षुरधाने अवहिता स्यात् विशंभरो व विशंभर कुलाय तम न पश्यन्ति अकृत्स्नो हि स प्राणेन व प्राणो नाम भवति वदन वाक् पश्यम ऋक्षा श्रीवन श्रोत्रम मनवानो मना ता अन्यः स यतानि कर्म नाम नमेव स यो यत एक एक उपास्यते न स वेद अकृत्स्नो हि एषो अत एक एकेन भवति आत्म एत्योवपसीत अत्र ह्वेते सर्व एकं भवन्ति तद एतत् पदनियमस्य सर्वस्य यद्यमानः म आत्मा अनेन हि एतत् सर्वं वेद यथाहवपदेन न नु विन्देव देवेन कीर्तिं श्लोकं विन्दते य एवं वेद. So this universe was then unmanifested. And that's what we are learning. First, it was unmanifested. It manifested itself only as a name and form. It got such and such name and such form. So even now, the universe is manifested only as a name and form. It gets such and such name and such form. This Supreme Self has penetrated into all these bodies up to the nail ends. Okay, so clearly this Rishi is telling us that Brahm is everywhere. Kan kan mein. So this Supreme Self has penetrated into all these bodies up to the nail end, just as a razor lies in its case, or as fire lies in its source. People do not realize it, for it is incomplete when viewed as doing particular functions, when it only performs breathing, etc. It is called the vital force. When it speaks, the vocal organ, that is the speaker. When it sees, the eye. When it hears, the ear, the listener. When it thinks, the mind, thinker, and so on. These are but its names due to functions. He who meditates upon each aspect of this totality does not know, because being qualified by each aspect of the totality, it is incomplete. One should meditate upon it only as the Supreme Self, because in it all these become one. Of all these, this entity called the Self alone is to be known. So clearly, he is telling us, meditate on the Self alone. Because one knows all these through it. So that means by knowing it, you know it all. See, just like when we water the roots of the plant, the water goes up into the stem also, branches also, leaves also, flowers also, fruits also. So we only water the roots. We don't water each and every different parts of the plant. The same way, he is suggesting that meditate on the Self alone. Of all these, this entity called the Self alone is to be known, because one knows all these through it, just as one can find a missing animal through its footprints. So it's like another analogy he is giving. From the footprints, we can find out. He who knows thus attains reputation and company of his relatives, or the knowledge of unity and liberation. Beautiful verse. Lot of information in there, lot to think about. First thing he's telling us that undifferentiated being became manifested through the cosmic mind. And in this process of manifestation, the cosmic mind became active and cognized the objects. Perception, sensation, memory, imagination, judgment, etc. Those are all the powers of the individual mind, which is a miniature form of the cosmic mind. Okay? A ray of the cosmic mind projected out and assumed the shape of the created objects and also enveloped them. It is after this that the worlds came to be perceived. Prior to this, where were they? They were in the womb of Brahma. Mental image and external object produce an effect which is known as a form. There are so many forms we go through every single day. But these are all only forms. And all the forms, we have given the names also. Whatever object we see here has got its image in the cosmic mind. The interaction between the cosmic mind and the cosmic body, so it's like a cosmic mind is called Hiranyagarbha, and cosmic body is Virat. So world that we see outside, that's what it is. When the cosmic mind projects itself through the eye and assumes the shapes of the objects outside, we see different objects. It's like a differentiation in the forms. That's how we know that apple looks different than the banana. Or even in the human beings, we can differentiate from one person to the other person. Names are different. But even if the names are same, the forms are different. So differentiation. So when it differentiates itself, what this mantra is telling us, that the differentiation is not caused by any foreign power. Foreign power means anything external to it. Okay, it's like because of the internalization. This is how perception takes place. Just like a spider weaves out the web from its own body, cosmic mind throws out this universe from its own body during waking state and withdraws it into its womb during a deep sleep state. So world is the mental projection of Hiranyagarbha. Externalized, or you can call it objectified. Just like an individual mind of one person, even though appears to be separated from the mind of somebody else, but there's only a thin wall of the finest kind of matter. So Virat is the sum total of all bodies. Virat. We learned that earlier. So prior to creation, the physical universe was latent in him. The different beings were created by him. And it has been described in some mantras before. Each being came to be differentiated by a name and form. Even now, this is what we use, the name and the forms. But it is clear that the manifested universe is fully animated by him as the cosmic power. This is the knowledge this Rishi is giving it to us. That means he is eminent in all the different names and different forms in the universe. So this very self, when this mantra states, this Rishi says, enters into all bodies up to the nail ends. And then he gives us a simile over here. A razor put in its case remains pervading in the whole of the case. Fire remains pervading the whole of the wood. You cannot say that fire is in the front or the back only, not in the middle. Fire is everywhere. So the one air enters into the world and becomes the different winds, assuming the names such as northern wind, eastern wind. We use those terms, but it's one wind. So the same way, the one inner soul of all things resides in every body, pervading it in general and particular manner, yet remains distinct from it. We start calling that this is my Atma, your Atma. But this Upanishad says that he who is dwelling in the earth, who is within the earth, When the earth does not know whose body is the earth, who really controls the earth, that inner ruler, inner controller, that is Brahma. Or you can call it immortal self. Because most of the time we view all this partially. That's why it's called incomplete cognition. Because a particular object presents different perceptions from different perspectives. It depends where we are looking at and how we are looking at. This mantra says that he is Pran by name when he performs the functions of breathing. While speaking his speech. So it's like from our perception, we are calling it, we are giving the names, but the energy is the same. He performs the action of seeing, then he is the eye. So these names, such as speech, mind, pran, are merely due to his actions. So we should meditate upon the truth which is one. Wise call it variously. Various names they have given, but truth is one. So that's why it's not wise to hold one or other of these aspects exclusively as the supreme. Each of these is merely one of his qualifications. And he who takes the qualifying aspect to be the supreme is truly viewing the reality in its entirety. To judge a thing by one or a few of its characters, that will be an incomplete estimate of the real nature. So the self or the Brahm is the unitary background of all phenomena and all beings. This is the message he is giving it to us. He says by knowing it, its infinite modifications become known. Even as the characteristics of all jars are known by knowing the one clay out of which the jars are made. Because you know the truth. So the same way when we know that one Brahma everywhere, then you know it all. So we acquire the knowledge of the entire phenomena, the infinite projections of the self by knowing him as the self of all beings. So by knowing this one self, we acquire the full knowledge about its infinite modifications. So this is a perfect knowledge, what he is giving it to us. Then in the next verse, verse number 8, he says, Tad etaya putrat preho vitat preho anye अस्मात् सर्व समात् अंतरतरम यद्यम आत्मा स यो अन्य आत्मना प्रियम ब्रुवाणम ब्रूयात् प्रियम रोतस्यम इति ईश्वरोह तथैव स्यात् आत्मानामेव प्रिये प्रियम उपासीत स य आत्माना एव प्रियम उपासते न हास्य प्रियम प्रमायुकम भवति. This self is dearer than a son, dearer than wealth, dearer than all other objects, being nearer than everything, because it's the closest. If anyone holding the self as dearest says to a person describing anything other than the self as dear, what is dear to you will perish. It will certainly be like that, for he is indeed capable of saying so. Therefore, one should meditate upon the self alone as dear. Of him who meditates upon the self alone as dear, no dear object is short-lived. So this is verse number 8, where very clearly he says the self, and whenever he says self, that is the soul or the Brahm, same thing. So the self who is the unitary background of the entire manifestation, which is all pervading, animating every object and being. So over here, he gives the example of a son first. He says, son means our offsprings. See, that's where the Putreshna came out to as our desire. Okay. So the son is generally held as the dearest among all, so our offsprings. But the self is dearer than the son. Dearer than gold and other wealth. Dearer than everything, he says. One loves others because one's own self is the self of those others. So when we see the sameness, we start loving that. This is what he's trying to tell us. Don't we start finding closeness if we meet somebody with the same last name as ours, or the same place we have come from, same kind of a background? We are looking for the sameness, sometimes even the profession. One time there was a student of mine used to come. She had some medical problems, taught her some yoga, and she gave up all this. She was diabetic also, a lot of other problems, but by following what she was told to do, all the medicines, she said, I have thrown it away. Whether it was a guru's blessing or whether it was a power of yoga or both. Her husband was a doctor. So she said, he is surprised. I said, why don't you bring him to the ashram? She clearly told me he wouldn't like to talk to anybody who's not a doctor. Sameness. So I was not a doctor, so he didn't want to come and talk, even though he saw the result. The same. So this is what this mantra is telling us, that one loves others because one's own self is the self of those others. We'll see that it will be said later on that it is for the sake of the self that everything is dear. The self is more internal and intimate than anything else. While all other things perish, the self alone is immortal, and we know that. Even if we have not experienced it, but we believe in it, because our rishis say that, our primary scriptures say that. Something which remains same while the bodies change. In fact, bodies can perish, but that self is immortal. So it is the self that must be considered as dearer than everything else. So by giving all this knowledge, he's telling us, pay attention to that. It is dear to you. The self is dear to you, but how much time you spend knowing this self? Because anybody who's dear to us, we like to spend more time. And how do we spend time with the self? When we meditate. Meditate on the self. How much time we spend? He who holds some object other than the self as dearer than the self and desires to possess that object must know that that object of his desire will certainly perish. There's nothing which is immortal except the self. This is the knowledge he is giving it to us. Something which is immortal, we don't spend time knowing it. Something which will perish soon, very soon. This body can last, sure, few decades at the most. How much time we have spent on this body? Or even the outside things. But something which is permanent. He's bringing our attention to this immortality aspect of that self. So everything will perish to him who holds the non-self as the dear, as everything is non-self. And it is a fact. And he who considers the self alone as dear, the perishable objects, they lose their charm for him. Because that person is not deluded by their glittering and attractive appearances. This is what happens. This is what we see in the wise people, the people who have really experienced it. We don't see them running after these flimsy, worldly objects because they know what is important. Let's look at the next verse, verse number 9. Tad ahu yat brahm vidyah sarvam bhavishyantah manushya manyante kimu tad brahm ev smat sarvam bhavat iti abhavat iti. Some seekers say men think through the knowledge of Brahma we shall attain identity with the universe. Well, what did that Brahma know by which it attained identity with the universe? So he is putting a question in our mind towards that statement which some people say. Because some say that men alone are privileged and qualified to achieve in a special manner either a state of salvation or of prosperity. So the seekers say that men think that by the knowledge of Brahma, they can become the all. And what is that knowledge, he says? So we all know that Brahm over here means the supreme soul, absolute soul. So knowledge by which he is known is the knowledge of the Brahm. And it is the direct intuitive knowledge. Or you can call it an intuitive experience. It's not just only a theoretical knowledge, it is a realization or experience. Because after acquiring the knowledge of Brahma, what really happens? The mind is dissolved. The projection of creation ceases. The soul is in a state of merger because it's identifying with Brahma here and now. And this has been the experience of many yogis. It is not just a far-fetched knowledge. This is what we all need to experience. And you cannot just dislodge this logically, because this is something you have to experience it. Because the world continues to exist only for those who have not aspired for this knowledge. People who have not acquired identity with Brahma, for them this world definitely exists. It's almost like when a river enters the ocean, it loses its name. It even loses its form. So this is what happens to the yogis who have merged. They lose their name and forms. Identity as the individual soul is gone. Because Brahm is finally and integrally experienced by these yogis. Because there's only one absolute. There cannot be two absolute. So what indeed Brahm knew by which it became all this universe? And if it knew something became eminent in the creation, would it not lose its infinite integral nature? The answer to this is given in this verse actually. So Brahma generates the universe out of himself and interpenetrates it, transcends it, is not limited by it, and maintains his original infinite and integral nature. We recite this mantra every day. Purnamada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. Or you can understand from the ether or the space. Space is the nearest and the clearest analogy to Brahma because it is the subtlest of those five elements. It is unaffected by diversity. It stays the same, no matter what happens. No change in it. The same way, Brahm is the efficient as well as the material cause of the universe. The manifestation of the universe in no way affects Brahm, nor does the universe detract from Brahm. Because the nature, the innate nature is divinity and infinity. Purnam. The manifested universe is dependent. It is changing compared to Brahm. Brahm is not dependent upon the manifested universe. Manifested world is dependent upon Brahm. So strictly speaking, from the highest point of view, the world is not an illusion. It is definitely a reality itself. From the empirical point of view, we may say it is a lower order of reality, relative, and ever changing. So that's why we often use the word to understand it absolute reality and a relative reality. The manifested world we live in is a relative reality compared with the Brahm. Because Brahm is unconditioned, non changing, eternal, non dual, and transcendental absolute. Okay, so that's why I was mentioning this famous Shanti mantra. That is full, this is full. The full is born from the full. If you take away the full from the full, what remains still is the full. Infinite minus infinite is still infinite. This is the spiritual counterpart of the mathematical concept that infinity added to or subtracted from infinity or multiplied or divided by infinity is still infinity. So Brahm does not lose his integral and infinite nature, though he manifests himself as the entire universe. And the next mantra is a reply to the question which we see in this mantra, where Rishi is dealing with the further knowledge of Brahma about this entire creation. So, verse number 10. Brahm ya idam agra asit tad atmanam evyayate aham brahma asmiti tasmat sarvam bhavat tadyo yo deva nam pratye buddhyat sa ev tad bhavat tath shnam tatha manusya nam tadva etat pashyan shri devah pratipede aham manurbhavam suryashiti तद इदम तर्हि य एवं वेद अहम ब्रह्म अस्मिति स इदम सर्वं भवति तस्य न देवाश्न भूत्या ईष्टे आत्मा हेषाम स भवति अथ यो अन्याम देवताम उपासते अन्यो स अन्यो अहम स्मृति न स वेद यथा पशुरेव एवं स देवानाम यथा हवे बहवा पशवो मनुष्यम भुञ्जीयुः एवं एकः पुरुषो देवान् वृणक्तिः एकस्मिन्नेव पश्चावादि यमने प्रियं भवति किमरि बहुसृष्टिः तस्मादेषां तन्प्रियं यत् तन्मः मनुष्याः विद्युः. So this self was verily Brahma at first. It knew only itself as I am Brahma. Because of that, it became all the universe. And whosoever among the gods realized it became Brahma. Similarly, among the sages and among men, the sage Vamdev, realizing his own self as that, knew I was Manu and the sun. And even now, whoever knows that in a similar way as I am Brahma becomes this universe. Even the gods are powerless to prevent his becoming the universe. These gods means the devatas. For he becomes their self. On the other hand, he who adores another god thinking he is different from me and I am different from him does not know. As is an animal, so is he to the gods. As many animals serve a man, so does each man serve the gods. If even one animal is taken away, it causes unpleasantness. What should one say of many animals? Therefore, it is not pleasant to the gods that men should realize this self. I think it's about time to stop it here and we'll look at this verse, verse number 10, next week. ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमदाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. Thank you very much for joining.